Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Beis will begin Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph, 9 lines from the bottom. Continue on with the discussion about being memayit, minimizing the distance from the ground to the top of the wall. As we learned previously, that if the height of the wall is 10 tvachim or more, then that is considered to be a separate makam, and therefore one cannot carry from the chotzer to the top of the wall. But if the height is less than 10, then one could. The chotzer that has the distance is less than 10 could use the top of the wall. So we discussed certain items that are considered to be a miyut, and are considered to be a miyut minimizing the height, and other items that are not. So Zok the Gemara, Amar Rav Yechiel Kafa Sefel, if a person turned over a basin, mimayit, that does reduce the height. That reduces the height from the ground to the top of the wall. If it's less than 10 tvachim, then it's considered a Pesach. He can use the top of the wall. Why should that be considered to be a miyut? That's something that's movable. The basin, the sefer, is something that's movable. It's not a muksa item. It's not a permanent item. And therefore, and the klal is that something that is movable on Shabbos is not mamayit. If it's something that one could move away, it's not mamayit the item. It's not that item, rather, is not mamayit the height. And what it says, what we're talking about over here is that he piled earth around it. He attached it to the ground by piling earth around it. Now, at this point, what the Gemara is assuming, therefore, he will not be able to move it. He will not be able to lift it up, because by doing that, he'll be moving the earth. And the earth is muksa, and therefore, it's something that he can't be metaltal. And therefore, it's considered to be a miyut, it's memayit, the height. Even if he attaches it to the ground, why should that make a difference? If you have an unripe fig that was buried in straw, before Shabbos you buried it in straw in order to ripen it. Or you took a cake that was insulated, that was buried in coals. So before Shabbos, you put the dough into the coals to bake. Now on Shabbos, the coals have been extinguished, the fire isn't burning, but the coals are muksa. The tevin is muksa. Now, im megula miksalson, it tells b'Shabbos. If part of the fig or part of the cake is exposed, so that you are touching, you're holding on, grabbing on to the cake and the fig, which are not muksa, then you can take it and remove it on Shabbos. Now, even though that indirectly causes the earth and the coals rather and the tevin, the straw, to be moved, it's mutter. Why is it mutter? Because that's called tilt minatzad. It's called that you're moving the muksa indirectly, not directly. And therefore, it's mutter. So here also, even if it's the case of the sefer, the chabra ba'ara, but it's still not considered like you're moving the muksa. It's tiltum minatzad. So therefore, it's a davar hanittal. If it's a davar hanittal, why should it be memayit, the height from the ground to the wall? The more answers and this what we're talking about over here is that the base and the sefer has rims. So now, if you're going to remove it, the earth that's resting on the rims, you'll be picking it up. Now, picking up the earth, lifting up the earth, is daimet to be chayfer, to excavating, to digging. And that's why it's also. So therefore, it's not a davar hanittal. You can't remove it because it's daimet to chayfer. It's like digging, and therefore it's permanent. You can't move it, and therefore it's memayit, the height from the ground to the wall. Frek the Gemara, even if it has a rim, why does that make a difference? We learned in a Mishnah, if one buries a turnip or radish, he puts it in the ground under a grapevine, so he puts that to store under a gefen. Bisman, when we say bisman, shemixes all megulin, when some of the leaves of it are exposed, so therefore he can remove it by holding on to the leaves of the radish. So if some of the leaves are exposed, so he can remove it by picking up the leaves, by grabbing the leaves and picking up the radish or the turnip. It's not considered to be planted in the ground. It's not considered to be planted, and therefore it's not a chashash of kilayim. We don't consider it that he's planting kilayim, planting these yerakos, these vegetables, under the grapevine. And v'lo mishum meiser, and it's not a chashash of meiser. It does not have to be mafresh meiser, meaning even if it was increased in the size of it, increased by being in the ground. You put it to store in the ground. Even if it increased in size, we don't consider this to be an actual new growth that requires being mafresh meiser from them. We say that it's just the moisture of the ground. It's not considered planted in the ground. He doesn't have to be mafresh meiser. V'lai mishum shvius. It's not considered like he is planting in the Shemitah year. There's a machlokes rishonim. Do we say this only if it has not taken root, or even if it has taken root? But I'll call upon him. If he puts there in the ground for storage and the leaves are exposed and he can remove it by grabbing onto the leaves, it's not considered planted in the ground. And it's when he tell him b'Shabbos, it can be removed on Shabbos, because since it's not considered to be planted in the ground, then it's therefore removing it is not considered to be removing it from something which is planted in the ground. So therefore, even if the basin, even if it has rims, why is it something that he cannot remove? It should be considered something that he could remove, that it's nitalin b'Shabbos. And if it is nitalin b'Shabbos, it's not memayet the height. Where it says, but we're talking about over here is that is it embedded in the ground to that extent that he cannot remove it just by grabbing onto part of it and picking it up. He would require a shovel or a hoe to dig it out. There it's considered to be buried in the ground and part of the ground, and therefore that he cannot do on Shabbos. Therefore it's considered to be permanently over there, and therefore it is memayet the height. It therefore limits the height, and we say therefore it's not considered 10 tefachim from the ground, and the kaisel is he can use the kaisel. So continuing on, now the Gemara is continuing on with other things that we say are a miut, that you can be memayet. Sulam mitzri and memayet. If it's an Egyptian ladder, it does not reduce the height. Vahatsuri memayet. But a tsuri one is memayet. That is memayet the height. Echidami sulam hamitzri. What is the case of a sulam hamitzri? Amud Yomi Masechet kol she'enoi arba chavakim. If it doesn't have at least 4 rungs. So a sulam hamitzri is something which is a light ladder. It's a small ladder, so it has no permanence over there. It doesn't have 4 rungs. It has less than 4 rungs. So therefore, it's something that's movable. He'll move it away. Something which is larger than that, which is heavier than that, the tsuri is memayet. As Taisus explains over here, we're talking about household ladders that are used to move from one place to the next. Since they're used to move from one place to the next, they're not muksa. So they're not muksa, they are movable. So what will render these things, what will render them to be something which is, now we say memayet? So if it's heavy and will stay in its place where it's physically heavy, he won't move it. But if it's something light, which he will move it over there, then we say that something like that, when we say if it's light, it's something he'll move, it is not memayet. Something like that, it'll not memayet. Now, we had the previous discussion, and we talked about the seifel. Now, we talked about the seifel over there, and we said that it is memayet only if it's something which he cannot remove. We said it was embedded in the ground. He needs a shovel to remove it, which is also in Shabbos. It's considered permanent. It's considered fixed in its place. Well, what would be the din if you would have a seifel, a basin, or a kli, which you are allowed to move, but it is heavy? Now, over here you have this ladder, which is permitted. So Taisa says we're talking where it's not muksa, it's permitted to move. If it's heavy, it's memayet. If it's light, it's not memayet. So what will we say, therefore, about kalim, about the seifel? Will we say a similar type of thing? Now, it's mash from the Gemara before that by the seifel, we only say it's memayet because he cannot move it. But if he could move it, if it would be mutter to move, even though it's difficult, it's mashma that it would not be mamayit. So the Ritva's Taka does make a chilik, and he makes a distinction between kalim and other items. He says a keli, it has to be something which is fixed in its place. It has to be fixed in its place, similar to the case we had by Sefer. Otherwise, it's not mamayit. Because a keli, by definition, is something that it's a movable item. By kalim, our vessels are movable items. Therefore, it has to be something which is fixed in its place. Either mitam isur or mitam physically, that it's fixed, it's now secure and fixed in its place. But however, the Ritva says that if we're talking about other items which are not kalim, we're talking about materials and things of that nature, it doesn't have to be fixed in place. As long as it's something which is heavy, which is normally not moved, that would also be mimayat. My time the sulam to my mayan. Why do we say the sulam is the sulam mitzri? My time the sulam mitzri like a mayan. Why is that so? Amar leila shmila tinche here. Amar machabarad amar amnuna amar rav. Mishum davar davar shenitl b'Shabbos. It's something that's moved on Shabbos. Called davar shenitl b'Shabbos in my mayan. So, so he asked the question. I feel it's tsuri nami. Well, then you should say the same thing about the tsuri ladder. He says, no. He answered, Hasam, kaiv de kaiva. Over there, since it's heavy, it remains in its place. He is not going to move it around. So practically, the way Rashi learns, he's not going to move it because it's heavy. It's difficult. Now, the Rashba learns it's not because of the physical properties. He learns because it's something that is also to move. It's something that's normally fixed in its place, and therefore there's an isser in removing. But the way Rashi is learning it is it's heavy. Practically speaking, he will not move it. Amar Abaye, if you have a wall between two chatzeres, and it's 10 high, and he put a ladder on each side, and the distance between them on the top of the wall is not 3 tvachim, it's less than 3 tvachim, it's mimayit. But shleisha ain't a mimayit. If it's 3, it's not mimayit. Now, over here, so there's really two factors when we say mimayit. One is what we were talking about till now, is that if you have the height from the ground, so if this is resting on the ground, you have the wall, and you have a platform here resting on the ground, and therefore the height from the platform to the top of the wall is less than 10, then the people in the chutz here can use the top of the wall. What we're discussing over now is a different aspect of it, is if you have a wall, now, if you have two chatzeres, a chatzer on one side, a chatzer on the other side, in order for them to be ma'ariv together, to join together in an eruv, there has to be a pesach, a chaloin, a window, a door. Now, so what we're discussing over here is you have a ladder on each side of the wall. So if you have a ladder on one side, that doesn't give it a din of a Pesach to say that it has access to the other chotzer, to the chotzer on the other side of the wall. Now, even if this is Dalet, it has a width of Dalet, but if it only comes up as a ladder on one side of the wall, it'll come up to the top of the wall. It doesn't give it access to the other side. If, however, on the other side of the wall, then similarly, you have a ladder on the other side of the wall. So you have a ladder on both sides. Then if they're opposite each other, that's a Pesach, because people can climb up the ladder and go up one side and down on the other. Now let's say the ladders are not directly opposite each other. So if you have the ladders that are directly opposite each other on the top of the wall, so then they have access and they can come up the ladder and across and down. But even if they're not, if they're a little bit removed from each other, as long as that they're within 3 tvachim of each other on the top of the wall, we still say they can climb the ladder and come across and down on the other side. And therefore, it's still considered to be that they have access. It's a Pesach, it's like a window or a door that they can go from one to the other. But if it's more than 3 Tvachim away, then this is not, they're considered to be two independent ladders, and they're not connected. So you have a ladder and access up, but not down. Ladder up here, but not down here. So that's not considered to be a Pesach. But the Gemara says, but that's only if the wall, the width of the wall is not 4, is less than 4. Then it's not convenient, it's difficult to climb up one side, to climb up and come across and come down. So they have to be, the ladders have to be opposite each other or within 3 of each other. But if the wall is Daled, then it's not a factor, because even if they have to come up the ladder on one end and then walk across the wall and come down on the ladder on the other end, it's accessible. It's wide enough that they can conveniently do that. So if the one ladder is here, they can climb up on this side, come up, walk across, and come down on the ladder on the other side. So therefore it's permissible. If you built a platform on top of another platform. So continuing on with the miut being mamayet from the height, of the wall from the ground to the top of the wall. So there's a principle that to be mamayet, in order to minimize the height, the platform that he's building has to be resting on the ground. A miut ba'avir, floating in the airspace, so to speak, is not mamayit. It has to be that it's resting on the ground. So if he built an itztaba, gabe itztaba, he had one platform that was on the ground, and then he had another platform that he built on top of it. He had posts that were holding this up. He had one on top of the other one. Now this one is not relevant because it's not on the ground. If this one is Daled, it's a valid miut, it's a valid platform, so it will reduce the height from the ground to the top of the wall. So therefore, if the bottom one is arba, it's mamayit. There's a machlekes rishonim. When you say arba, does it mean arba daled al daled, or does it mean a length of arba opposite on the length of the wall is a daled? I'll call upon him if the bottom one is daled or daled al daled, it's on the ground, so it's a valid miut. It's a platform which is mamayit. The top one, therefore, is not relevant. But inami ein betachtoina. But alternatively, even if the bottom one doesn't have daled, inami ein betachtoina arba v'yesh bal yoin arba, but the top one does ve'ein bein zel lezeh shleisha, and there's no 3 tvachim between them, then in this case, then we can consider the top one to be resting on the ground. It's within 3, and this one has daled, even if this one does not, so it's valid. Then it's mamayit. A similar type of halacha of Amr of Nachman Amr of Avua, Sulam Shlishli voice of Porchais, if you have a ladder, as opposed to a staircase, if you have a ladder, and you have a ladder that's upright, and it has rungs of the ladder, and one on top of the other, you have a vertical upright ladder that has the rungs. So it's the same principle. The miut has to be, the platform has to be on the ground. So if the bottom rung is 4, so therefore it in itself is a platform, and if its bottom one is on the ground or within 3 of the ground, it's considered to be resting on the ground, then it's mamayit. And then the other rungs aren't relevant. But but alternatively, even if it doesn't have 4, so in it itself cannot be considered to be a platform of miut. But and the upper one has. Now, if the bottom one is not 4. The upper one is, the upper rung of the ladder is, and there's not 3 between them, then this is considered resting on the ground, then it's Mamayit. The same type of principle.